Russian Foreign Minister has met with former President Raúl Castro during his official visit to Cuba. New British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is welcomed to his new role with protest. And Ugandan musician Bobby Wine has officially announced his intention to run for president. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in Cuba on a two-day official visit. The minister held talks with former President and First Secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba, Raúl Castro. Following their meeting, Castro and Lavrov took part in the opening ceremony of the renovated Statue of the Republic in Havana's National Capitol building, as a team of Russian experts took part in restoration process. Minister Lavrov also met with his Cuban counterpart Bruno Rodriguez at the beginning of the day. The two of them then spoke to the media.
We thank the support of the Russian government, its parliament and its people in our struggle against the unjust, obsolete and genocidal economic and financial blockade imposed by the United States on Cuba, a flagrant violation of international law. I've told Foreign Minister Lavrov that the Russian people and the government have and will continue to have the support in their own rejection of the unilateral and arbitrary sanctions that our sister nation has endured since 2014. We are convinced that even under these difficult international circumstances, our history and our special relationship will continue to grow stronger in the future for our mutual benefit.
We salute the strength of the Cuban people who have withstood all the difficulties of the economic sanctions, and in spite of these they have achieved new successes in education, in healthcare, and as I said, we will continue to stand by Cuba and the Cuban people, defending together the principles of justice and international law that are in the United Nations Charter.
Our correspondent in Havana, Fabiola Lopez, has more on Lavrov's visit.
I am outside the Cuban Foreign Ministry, where the foreign ministers Bruno Rodriguez and Sergei Lavrov have just been holding a news conference after their first official talks. Both ministers said they had discussed the strategic character of the relations between the two countries. They noted their firm agreement on the need to defend international peace, as well as their desire to develop further the cooperation between Russia and Cuba. Sergei Lavrov said Russia is stepping up its solidarity with the Cuban people against the blockade imposed by the United States, while Bruno Rodriguez said Cuba offers Russia the same solidarity in the face of the sanctions it faces. In relation to Venezuela, Lavrov said it was ridiculous that some people argued that countries in the East should not have relations with countries in the West, a reference to the Monroe Doctrine. And he said you only have to look at a map to see all the places that the U.S. has military bases. Rodriguez said the United States is trying to conceal the failure of its policies in Venezuela and that Cuba will stand by the Venezuelan people, whatever threats it receives.
We thank Fabiola for that report. Cooperation between Cuba and Russia has been growing in the last few years. Russia is playing an active role in Cuba's plan for economic and social development to the year 2030. In 2018, trade between the two countries reached a value of $388 million. That was 34% more than in 2017. Russia has helped Cuba set up assembly lines for gas and Ural vehicles, which in the future Cuba may export to third countries. And tourism is also a growth area, with more than 137,000 Russian tourists visiting Cuba in 2018. And staying in Cuba, government authorities have dismissed the findings of a new study on the alleged brain injuries of former U.S. diplomats working in the island. The study, which appeared in a U.S. medical journal, alleges that U.S. diplomats experienced some kind of brain trauma after receiving mysterious head injuries in Havana. But Cuban authorities failed to provide any clear conclusion and fails to clarify a cause for the alleged symptoms suffered by the diplomats.
The article does not even talk about the existence of brain damage, as in others that have been published. It also talks about failing to identify the cause and that further studies are needed to clarify these symptoms.
The new article does not allow for reaching clear scientific conclusions. It could be said that the picture of the medical results is still more confusing and contradictory, and it is also more complicated. And this is because criticisms made by the international scientific community against the previous article have not been properly answered.
Venezuela is conducting the Simón Bolívar Liberation Campaign 2019 military exercises in defense of its sovereignty. The drills mark 236 years since the birth of Simón Bolívar, the Venezuelan military and political leader who liberated territory, which would eventually make up 6 modern countries. They also celebrate 196 years since the founding of the Bolivarian Navy. President Nicolás Maduro said that Venezuela is testing arms in order to defend the territorial integrity of the country.
The first exercises this year were held to mark the bicentennial of the Angostura Congress. 200 years ago, on the 15th of February. This is the second military exercise we've conducted this year. This first phase begins to mark the day of the Bolivarian Navy, and the Navy is going to be the vanguard of these drills from the 24th of July until the 28th. When you see these images, that discipline, that professionalism, that unity, that cohesion, that morality, that loyalty, that military capacity, you see that Venezuela has a powerful base for what it needs, which is simply peace and sovereignty. Peace with independence, peace with self-determination, peace with equality, peace with democracy, peace with freedom, peace with the people, peace with prosperity and social contentment, peace. Venezuela is defended, and that's shown here.
Moving on, the governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosselló, has not resigned and is reflecting on his future, according to a Secretary of Public Affairs. Protesters have been in the streets again after local media reported the governor was about to announce he was stepping down. They made it clear they won't stop until Rosselló leaves office. Puerto Rico has been calling for his resignation for over a week now after a leaked social media chat revealed his misogynistic and racist messages. He has already stepped down as leader of the new Progressive Party and is expected to be replaced as governor by Justice Secretary Wanda Vázquez. The neoliberal party has pushed an agenda of privatization in Puerto Rico and is presently embroiled in a corruption scandal. We were joined earlier by Rafael Bernabé from the Citizens Victory Movement to talk more about this.
One of the wonderful things that has happened as a result of this process is that literally hundreds of thousands of people who had never in the past participated in social struggles, in mobilizations, in protests, in marches, are very much activated now, have had the experience of being in the streets struggling, and that will be carried over to other social struggles in Puerto Rico. So we feel that the elimination of Rosselló from the governorship is going to be the start of a new chapter in Puerto Rico's economic, social, and political history. And people are looking for new alternatives, and we hope that the unity that we have forged in the struggle against Rosselló, unity of the labor movement, of the women's movement, the environmental movement, and so on, all of these movements will come together in new political alternatives to revert the neoliberal policies that we have been suffering from for decades.
Former Colombian paramilitary chief Carlos Mario Jimenez arrived in Colombia from the U.S., where he served an 11-year prison sentence for drug trafficking, forced disappearance, and gender violence, among other crimes. Meanwhile, the victims in Colombia demand justice.
This weekend, former paramilitary chief Carlos Mario Jimenez, alias Macaco, arrived in Colombia from the U.S., where he was serving an 11-year sentence for drug trafficking. Macaco led the central block of Bolivar and was responsible for crimes such as forced disappearance, displacement, gender violence, recruitment of minors, massacres, among others.
In real life, it was the strongest bloc. they were able to control almost 5 departments, hundreds of municipalities, and elected various senators. The military chief was Julián Bolívar, the economic commander was Macaco, and the political commander was a man named Ernesto Báez. And that bloc was one of the ones that least cooperated with judicial authorities.
Departments like Cauca and Antioquia are where most assassinations of social leaders have taken place, and this could continue thanks to the return of Macaco.
Some 8 or 9 months ago, a strong war started to take place in the zone where Macaco was strong. Today, Colombia is going through a civil war in a zone called El Bajo Cauca Antioqueño. Municipalities of Cáceres, Taraza, Caucasia, and the rumor was that it was all due to Macaco's return.
Macaco's victims have mixed feelings about his return, like for Nancy Galarraga, who lost 4 siblings the same day due to the actions of the paramilitary. They killed her siblings in the department of Putumayo in front of everybody, and no one did anything about it.
This has been very painful for me. Every time I do an interview, it's like bringing back all the memories of pain and sadness in my heart. All I want is justice for my family, that those people who caused my family so much pain, that they pay for what they did.
And although in this case, the bodies of the Galarragas were found and some paramilitaries received sentences, it is still not enough for the Galarragas sisters, and in many other cases. They feel that much more needs to be done to ensure justice for victims of paramilitaries.
For the indigenous San Marcelino in the Quechua community, where girls under 15 years old disappeared, ancestral authorities assaulted, and other cases like the disappearance of professors, campesinos, and farmers, the perpetrators have still not been brought to justice.
Carlos Mario Jimenez, Macaco, will have to respond for the crimes he committed to the Colombian justice system.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 12 people were killed during overnight attacks in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Authorities believe the perpetrators were members of the ADF militia group, although no one has claimed responsibility. The attacks were carried out in the northeast region of the country, with 9 of the victims being killed near the city of Beni. DRC security forces said they are still looking for the assailants.
We called military authorities ourselves so they could check what it was about. Then we found out that there was an enemy intrusion, and unfortunately the enemy managed to kill 9 people from our town.
We think that our government has failed to protect us. It doesn't care about its population. So we will see if there are ways to protect ourselves. We have suffered enough. Every day we are losing our relatives and there's no positive change. No action taken to end this phenomenon. As a population, we will mobilize to see how we can protect ourselves.
In Kenya, the president has appointed an interim finance minister a day after the former minister was charged with corruption. Henry Rotich pleaded not guilty on Tuesday to corruption charges in connection with the misuse of funds for the construction of 2 dams. But Rotich is just one of the 26 people facing charges related to this project. He is due to return to court on August 8th. He has been replaced by Labor Minister Ukur Yatani. Sudan's military says a top general and several others have been arrested over a foiled coup attempt earlier this month. According to officials, those involved were General Hashim Abdel Mottalib, the head of Joint Chiefs of Staff, along with officers from the National Intelligence and Security Service. Several leaders from Islamic movements and the National Congress Party were also arrested. The South African opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, is set to celebrate its 6th anniversary this week. EFF will celebrate its beginning on July 26, 2013. Party leader Julius Malema has been traveling through South Africa's provinces, addressing supporters ahead of the occasion. The party is well known for its land reform policy, calling for land appropriation without compensation.
This is Commissar Muzikoza, the new elected Secretary General of the EFF Students' Command. Let us lastly wish the EFF their 6th anniversary birthday that will be hosted in Kanyamazane Stadium, Mpumalanga. We wish the EFF many more years, which will display a high level of unity and joy, peace and happiness. Let's call all upon all South Africans to attend and listen to the address by the Commander-in-Chief, the President.
The Ugandan musician and politician Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, popularly known as Bobi Wine, has officially announced his intention to run for president. Bobi Wine said he is ready to challenge the current leadership in the Ugandan election due to take place in 2021. He is currently a member of parliament representing Uganda's central region. He will be running for presidency as an independent candidate.
On behalf of the people of Uganda, I am challenging you to a free and fair election in 2021. While we unite, we must remember that our people are already united. Our people are united by their pain. Our people are united by their separation. Our people are united by the challenges they go through every day.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Boris Johnson has become the new British Prime Minister after Theresa May officially handed in her resignation. Protests against Johnson began even before he officially took the reins of the UK. Greenpeace activists interrupted the controversial New Conservative Party leader on his way to meet the Queen at Buckingham Palace, demanding that he place climate change at the top of his policy agenda. The anti-Brexit activist group led by donkeys projected an image of Johnson onto the Buckingham Palace facade, calling him a liar. Johnson has become under fierce criticism for his egotism, racism, and duplicity. And in his first move as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson has already appointed a number of hardline Brexit campaigners to the top jobs in his cabinet. Sajid Javid becomes the new Finance Minister, while Priti Patel will be Home Secretary and Dominic Raab the new Foreign Minister. The appointment suggests Johnson wants a government that is ideologically in line with his priority of leaving the EU on October the 31st, rather any attempt to unite his party. And protests against both the new MP and the Conservative Party also took place in the Scottish city of Glasgow. The radical Scottish independence activist Tommy Sheridan called for a general election, saying there is a democratic mandate for a second referendum on Scottish membership of the UK.
Who the next leader of the Tory party is, they don't have the right to determine who the next Prime Minister is. There needs to be a general election. There needs to be another general election. And my appeal to the SNP, to the wider Yes movement, is that at that general election, they've already said that although we're in a voluntary union, they're not going to allow us to have Indy Rev 2. The SNP won the general election in 2015 in Scotland. They won the Scottish election 2016 in Scotland. They won the general election again 2017 in Scotland. There is an existing democratic mandate for Indy Rev 2. It has to be used. It has to be used.
And let's go to our report from Pablo Navarrete.
So Boris Johnson has become the new British Prime Minister after going through the protocol meeting with the Queen, and he takes on this position a day after he won a decisive victory as the new leader of the Conservative Party with over 66% of the vote, beating his challenger Jeremy Hunt, the current Foreign Minister. Now, Boris Johnson is expected to face numerous challenges, a man widely criticised for numerous controversial declarations, racism, for being called a liar, untrustworthy, but he now becomes Britain's new Prime Minister, yet another Prime Minister who's not been elected into office directly. So he faces numerous challenges, but number one, his priority will be delivering the Brexit that his base so badly crave, and his positions on Brexit, the kind of more Brexiteer, pro-Brexit, hardline positions, are the ones that have kind of brought him into power and victory in the Conservative Party leadership election. Now, he's gave a speech not long ago today, his first speech as Prime Minister, where he said that the 31st of October that Britain would be leaving the European Union, whatever happens. So we've already had a number of resignations in the government. Just a short while ago, the Minister of Defence, Penny Mordaunt, resigned. We've had the Minister of Justice. We've had the Chancellor, effectively the Minister of Finance, resign. All members who are not considered allies of Boris Johnson. So he's going to have a lot to deal with on his plate, not least Brexit, but also trying to unify his party, which has been deeply divided over Brexit and numerous other issues. The challenge of Jeremy Corbyn, which he's already mentioned various times as a way of mobilising his base, saying that he's there to stop Jeremy Corbyn coming into power. Jeremy Corbyn, the socialist leader of the Labour Party. It should also be said that in central London today there will be thousands expected. We're in the midst of a heat wave at the moment in Britain. Thousands are expected in central London to protest Boris Johnson becoming the new British Prime Minister. So he will face, it's clear that he will face a strong resistance from various quarters to his policies, but we'll see what happens.
We thank Pablo Navarrete for that report. China has said it is prepared to go to war to protect its sovereignty after the United States announced a planned $2.2 billion arms sale to Taiwan. The Trump administration insisted Beijing by approving the deal July 8th. China considers Taiwan to be an integral part of its territory and that the island's separatist forces are the gravest threat to stability in the region.
We must resolutely point out that engaging in Taiwan independence is a dead end. If anyone dares to try to separate Taiwan from China, the Chinese army will not hesitate to go to war, to defend the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of the country.
And before we go, on Wednesday, Telesur celebrates 14 years of broadcasting, making the struggles of many people visible and connecting the global South. We leave you with this video to celebrate our anniversary.
We were born with a star to follow, with a symbol of freedom in our genes, with a voice of rebellion in our throats, with the sword of truth in our hands, a sword that doesn't wound but wins in battle. We have grown, breaking the mold, going places others don't or won't. We've crossed the Andes in a journey beyond our America, crossing seas, overcoming dangers. Our destination is no longer just the South. Our flag is that of the people, those who resist the return of the ghosts of the past, who are not resigned to another 100 years of solitude. We are the girls who grew up free and now are rebels opening new paths, the eyes and the ears, advancing step by step. We are Telesur, the news source of Latin America and the Caribbean.